Well, it's been a little bit, but I guess I'll finally finish this thing. I had mentioned in another video that anything that involves like going under the truck and laying on my back or crawling into the depths of the dashboard, I dread doing. So yeah, I've been working on it because that's all the stuff that's left. So I think in the last video, actually I have no idea what I showed anymore because it was like pre-corona and we're in like a whole new world now. We don't talk about that old stuff anymore. But I think I put the floor in it, maybe. Well, the truck runs, everything's plumbed up. I had the bright idea to put air conditioning in it because I don't drive vehicles without air conditioning. That's why all my cool stuff just sits all summer, because it's hot out. I can't handle it. It's above 72 degrees Fahrenheit, like I can't hang, just hide inside. So I got a nice vintage air kit, which you can see some of the doodads for here. I have some clips of me installing it here and there. Basically, I thought I was going to film this grand video about like how to install the vintage air kit in this truck, and it'd be like this hour-long epic, getting the super detail. Then I realized no one's going to care about that because it's tedious and boring. Same thing, I put like a stereo in it, like I made a video about that. I'm just like, no one really cares about this either. It's not 1998. No one puts aftermarket stereos in cars anymore. So the AC stuff's like somewhat in it, the under dash unit's in it, the evaporator core. I had to pull the whole dash apart and then the wheel well out, but I put a trans cooler on it too in the meantime. Bent up lines, like all nice and fancy. So if I just tidy up a few things that are left on this, like it's done and I can move on and maybe drive this nice and cool in the air conditioning before summer's over. Here's the fancy trans cooler that took way too long to mount. Even has like billet aluminum standoffs mounted to the evaporator core. I bent all the lines, like you can see there. It goes into the radiator trans cooler first, and then into the air one. That's the theory in my head about how they should work. Some people might disagree, but I run the hot stuff from the trans into the top, and then the coldness out the bottom into the air-to-air cooler, or the trans fluid to air cooler, and then back into the transmission. To my reasoning, that's the way that I think it would make it the coldest when it goes back into the trans. Okay, I got the new inner fender well in. Actually fit pretty good for cheap Chinese sheet metal. All the bolt holes lined up. All the bolt holes on the truck didn't have threads in them, but all the bolt holes in the inner fender did line up. And I also put a new battery tray in, and this support piece here that goes vertical. The old one that was in here was made out of like perforated angle iron for some reason. So got them new. That was really cheap. The fender was really cheap too. I think the inner fender for this thing's like 20 something bucks. And these are maybe like another 10 or 15. So no reason not to change them. You can see how much more roomy the engine bay is now with the vintage air in it. There's no fan anymore in there, no heater AC box anymore. So this is really all you see. Just the hoses get hooked up, the AC hoses, the heater hoses, a heater control valve goes there, but that's pretty much it of what protrudes from the firewall. So now I have to hook up the fuel pressure regulator again because I had it bolted to the old inner fender. I got to drill holes and mount it there. Got to hook the heater hoses up. I have to order the AC line kit because for some reason I didn't think I was going to need it. And I do, because there's a metal line that goes from that lower blue fitting to the condenser. It's like a pre-molded metal line. And then I'll have to make the other hoses, which is fine. But I don't know, for some reason I thought I didn't need that, and I do. So I have to order that from Vintage Air. But I'm hoping just to get the truck back to like the way it was when you last saw it when it was running, and that I can make the AC hoses whenever. So it's been another week, but still, you know, pegging away at this here. I decided to do the roadkill motivation instead of the flat piece of cardboard. I have the 3-dimensional white box list. So this is really all I have left to do to the truck before it's running and driving. Doesn't seem like much, so maybe I'll actually finish it. We'll see though. But I have to tie up the oxygen sensors because right now they're laying on the exhaust. I have to wire the air conditioning. I have to mount the ECU and the TAC module because they're just laying on the floor because I couldn't mount them, if you remember, until I mounted the Vintage Air in it. I have to get rid of all the original wiring in the engine bay here because I needed almost none of this for the LS. And a bunch of these wires are hot, so I should probably do something about that. Put the hood on it, put the wheels on it. I should probably put air in the tires because 2 of them are flat. And I need to mount the fuel line up on the firewall. Seeing how this side of the engine bay has become like 10 pounds of shit in a 1-pound box, I'm contemplating rerouting the fuel lines and the regulator over to the driver's side fender because there's nothing going on over there, but everything is on this passenger side fender. But I'll probably just leave it alone for now. But that might be down the road. All I'm going to do is just extend the lines. I'm not going to make new ones. I'll just get more fittings and join them where they're at now and run them over there and then run the fuel line up that side, just so there's less happening here. But yeah, see how much this we can get done, and maybe I can actually like have the truck move under its own power. I'll show you about the room situation. Put the intake back in. I got a coolant bottle from a 85 through 87. Mine was originally down there and kind of it was already in the way, and then the AC made it even worse. So I just got one of these and just screwed it into the fender. So that kind of moved some stuff out of the way. But there's a lot going on down here. Now that I have heater hoses in, you got a fuel pressure regulator. I still have to run AC hoses down there to the compressor, which is really gonna just put a lot of stuff in this area. It's kind of one of the things that I noticed. We had the same problem in the Winnebago. Like this corner of the engine bay is just screwed. Seems to be a thing with LS engines, I guess. I don't know if it's just because like the thermostat and the heater hoses are all like right there. Then you have all your starter wiring. Because like there's no accessories in this side of the motor. The alternator and the power steering are over there, but it just seems like everything is on this freaking passenger side. I mean, I don't know, just a pain in the ass in general. But if you look down there, see if I can zoom in for you, you can see the O2 sensor is kind of dangling. So it has one of those little Christmas tree things on it. Come on, zoom in. Yep. So I'm just going to blast a hole in a bracket and just push that through it. So that should hold that. Here's my fuel line situation here. You can see that's just kind of like laying pretty much on the header. There's all those wires. But since the last half of this video, I ordered the Vintage Air, what they call their like modified AC line. So it came with the hard line that runs along the fender here, up to here. I put that in because I don't have to modify. But then the hoses it gives you, they pre-terminate one end, is the high side and the low side. And then they just give you the fittings to make the other end. This is for people that basically aren't running a small block. So you can make your own hoses. But this fitting won't help me. I either need another 90 or actually like 2 straight fittings would be preferred because of where that compressor is. So I'm gonna have to wait on the AC hose. But that's not that big of a deal. The truck can run without them. I'll just be a pansy and sweat. Or actually, I won't drive it because I refuse to sweat. So I have to order some fittings and I can make the AC hoses up. So let's get cracking. I de-wired the engine bay, as in I removed all the wires that weren't for the LS. So you can see that's much better. I tied up the fuel line while I was at it. I mounted this coolant bottle, which is from an 85, I think is what I got it for. At a certain point in the 80s, it moved from the one that was like down here by the radiator to the fender mounted one. It doesn't really fit the form of the fender, but it's good enough. Like it's a little bit crooked, but who cares? So yeah, the fuel line is mounted to the inner fender well into the firewall. All that wiring's gone. Here's how much wire I removed. So, I don't know, there's probably like 20 feet of wire there. And once I cut that harness open on the back of the firewall there, it was pretty obvious like what was needed and what wasn't. There was a few other power legs like went to the alternator and stuff where I just cut a section out and joined the other ones together for like the power feed to the fuse box. So the engine bay, I think, is actually done. I can't think of anything left. Still never wired that freaking line lock, but whatever. Oh, and I ran all the wiring for the vintage air as I'm stepping on conduit. They want you to wire the hot and the ground, or the positive and the ground, directly to the battery, same as a lot of EFI systems do. It seems annoying, but whatever, I'll roll with it. And then that wiring there is tied to the fender and to the inner fender well. That's the circuit breaker right there for the vintage air. Then it runs into the firewall. I don't have the right fittings to make up 2 of the hoses yet. I'm gonna have to order them. But once I get those fittings, I'll be able to hook up the last 2 hoses down to the compressor. Oh, and I wired up, you can't see it here, but there's a wire running down to the actual compressor clutch, but that's in that like completely shit-packed area of the engine bay you can't see, so you just have to take my word for it. So now I just have to finish the interior. So here's the current manifestation going on in the interior of wiring. So I'm gonna do the normal YouTube thing, just snap my fingers here. It's all gonna get fixed. Actually, no, crap, that's much worse. Hold on. Yeah, screw that finger snapping, that probably didn't work at all. But it's tidied. So I don't have a dash pad yet, so I just threw the vintage air like conversion vents in there. These came with the kit, well, the second kit that I got. It was for the non-AC truck. This is what makes it the non-AC kit. It gives you the vents, and it gives you the vents for the dash bezel too, their gauge bezel. So I routed all the wires where they belong, left the zip tie tails on just so everyone can have like a panic attack with your OCD. there was nowhere to put the ECU under the dash. I tried everywhere. So this was the best compromise I found. I found these brackets on Amazon. A bunch of guys make them, but these were roughly what I needed, and they were pretty cheap. I'll put the link down in the description to them. I could have painted them, but I didn't. So I mean, the ECU is not bad there. I didn't want to put it up like in the passenger footwell, because then the AC, the condensation off the AC evaporator might go onto it or something and wreck it, and who knows. So what I'll probably do is I'll probably build like a little cup holder center console thing over it. Mostly as a cup holder to hide it. But I mean, realistically, it's pretty safe right there. But I'll show you what happened on the other side. Same thing, everything's all tidied up under there. It's not a complete disaster. The PSI extensions, like to the TAC module and to the gauges, were like super long, so I just had to kind of bundle them up and zip tie them up there. I put the TAC module, if you see those bolts right there, it's up under the radio. So then it's close to the gas pedal, everything goes good. It's kind of hidden. I mean, sucks you have bolt heads there, but I wasn't gonna go through and like put studs in there and stuff. Would have burnt the paint off anyway. The only issue I had is that I forgot when I first got this thing running that somehow I burnt up the fuse box. I checked it again. I have no constant battery power to any terminal in the fuse box. I checked all the fuses, they're all good, so I have no idea what the hell happened. But if I never mentioned it, the one day I got it started, it acted like the fuel pump went bad, and it turns out the constant power wire just overloaded the fuse box, I guess, between the ECU and the fuel pump. So I had to run another wire. I'll show you that quick. I just ran another wire through the firewall to another hole. I think this was through the gas pedal, the accelerator cable hole. I put a 40 amp circuit breaker in there and put it on like the power takeoff stud that all these trucks have on the firewall. So that's a 10 gauge wire, and that's powering the fuel pump and the radio constant. The ECU constant, I just remembered, actually runs down the starter. That's how they want you to run it. Oh yeah, the hood's on. Which brings me back to the demotivational box. Let's check it out. Here's the demotivational box. So the hood's on. The marker sucks. But yes, the hood is on. Thanks to Tony for the help with that. The AC is wired. This marker really sucks. And all that's done. Can't cross it off. So just get rid of that, so I don't think I haven't finished things. The only thing I have to add to that yet is to put the gauge surround bezel in, and I have to mount some AC vents in that. And other than that, the basic LS swap that took a year is about to be done. So one of the last things I want to do here to, I don't know, complete the not complete project, it's in my gauge bezel. Now you may notice that this gauge bezel is actually a piece of shit, and you wouldn't be right. The AC to actually cover up the disaster portions of this. At least they will if I plan this right. So Vintage Air gives you more AC vents to add to your non-AC truck. That one goes there. If I play my cards right, that should cover up that disaster. And the other one, goes where I cut the bezel out for the air fuel gauges that were in the truck when it was turboed, air fuel and boost rather. And don't feel bad them hacking up this gauge cluster, because aside from this, it's also broken up here and otherwise generally a piece of shit, like I said. I'm gonna get a new one. I'll actually buy an AC bezel and a new dash pad and everything, but they're really expensive. So before I put like $1,000 in the dashboard, I'll just roll with this for a while and iron out probably the more important things with the truck. Someday when I'm feeling like extra zesty, I'll get spendy and buy all the new stuff. It's been a week since I last worked on it on camera, but I actually got the thing done. It moved outside under its own power. I guess you can say it's done. There's still more to be done to it, but it runs and drives. I've already driven it a few times. Sorry for not like videoing the actual like maiden voyage or whatever, but it was kind of uneventful because nothing really went wrong. But yeah, I maybe have like 200 miles on it with the LS in it. I finished the AC lines yesterday. The fittings came in. It worked. Overnight it leaked out. There was all kind of leaks when we first charged it, like every O-ring was leaking. There was a bunch of fittings I may have forgotten to tighten, but even after we tightened them, they still ended up leaking. So that's going to require some attention. And then the only other issue, well, there's two issues that I had. I thought something was like totally wrong in the front suspension, and what it actually was, the power steering pump was like cutting out at idle. So you'd be going through a corner, like let off the gas, steering will get real hard, you'd press the gas, and suddenly you'd have power steering and you'd overcompensate. So it felt like something was screwed up, but that's what it actually was. And then the other issue was that it was overheating, like kind of. It was running about 210 on the gauge, and the weird thing is that if you turned the heat off, it would wildly overheat. But with the heat on, it stayed at 210. Heat off, like 230, 240 and climbing. And it has something to do with the fact that the Vintage Air has a heater control valve that actually cuts off one of the heater hoses. And factory, these engines just flow coolant all the time through the heater core. So the way I ended up fixing that was I actually put a high flow thermostat in it. And I'll show you a picture here.
So the stock thermostat's on the left there. You can see that inner plate is solid. The one on the right's the high flow. It has holes in it. And then you can see in this next picture that plate actually divides the two heater hoses. So I don't know if there's any rhyme or reason to this, or it's just pure luck, but putting in this thermostat fixed the overheating issue for what it was.
Yeah, I did that yesterday, and that completely fixed the overheating. Even when the AC is working, it never goes above like 190. The fan settings still have to be adjusted a little bit. The fan turns on too early because it kind of turns on and stays on below the thermostat temperature. So should jack them up so the fan actually cycles so it's not running all the time. But yeah, that and the power steering were like really the only issues. Other than that, it's pretty good. The stupid white like stake body thing in the bed makes a racket, and it feels like some parts may or may not be falling off the front end of the truck, possibly like major suspension components. But I'm not worried about that right now. Let's take it for a ride and go get some iced coffee. Well, we'll see how well the camera stays there. I don't have high hopes. Yep, still runs. I was worried about that whine in the transmission, like in first gear. I thought, instantly assumed that the trans was just junk. But when Corey heard it, he told me, he's like, oh yeah, we pulled that out of a bread truck. And I remember when we were in a junkyard, this transmission was out of like an Isuzu NPR like bread truck or box truck that was cut in half. And he said those have like heavy duty 480s in them that have like straight cut first, you know, planetaries or whatever. I don't know, freaking internals, automatics. But that's why it whines in first gear, is because I have like a medium duty truck trans in it. It's not really needed, but it's what I got, so. But at least that means the trans, well, it might not be junk. It's not junk for that reason, at least. And then the shift points can probably come down a little bit. It winds out in all the gears a little bit more than I like. I'd have the air conditioning on, like it does operate, but like I said, it all leaked out again, so I'm gonna recharge it again this week at work and put some dye in it. But it's not like a massive leak like it was the first few times where I could really find, you know, like where it's blowing 134 out of connections. It was mostly holding. It held all last night and yesterday and all that. Overall, it drives pretty good. The rotors or the drums are warped. It kind of feels like the drums because it kind of shakes the truck, not so much the wheel. So those probably need to get cut or just buy new ones for like 20 bucks or whatever they are. One of the same problems that's left over from when it had the turbo engine in it is that the gears in this truck suck. I don't know if they're 308s or 323s or 273s. but they're real steep highway gears. Combine that with the fact this is like a stock 4.8 stock tune. It has headers, but it's not exactly a powerhouse, and it kind of lugs the motor down. Kind of sounds like a UPS truck when you drive it. It doesn't have much exhaust noise to it. A lot quieter than I thought it was going to be. I got those big long mufflers because I was really worried about the long tubes. I thought the truck was going to be obnoxious, and it's actually like really quiet. I don't know how much you can hear over like probably the wind noise because the window's being down because, you know, the AC doesn't work. So the one thing that really baffles me is all the gauges work. I had my doubts about the fuel gauge and the speedometer. The fuel gauge because they don't work like in any of these freaking trucks for some reason. So even though I put a new sending unit and speedometer in it, I still thought it wasn't going to work. But the speedometer works and it seems to be accurate. So I'm pretty blown away that a 90 or 91 gauge cluster just wires right into an LS ECU. I mean, someone's probably saying I'm an idiot for thinking that's weird, but to me it's weird to something with that much, like a distance in between, it just like plugs in. You have something as archaic as TBI as far as fuel injection goes, and then it just plugs into the, you know, 2000 whatever ECU. It's kind of wacky to me, but I'm not going to complain because it made things pretty simple. And I showed in the earlier videos the temperature gauge, the oil pressure gauge, and the voltmeter. Those all worked. So I had my goal of actually having like factory gauges work, which is crazy. Thank you. Oh yeah. The next modification has to be cup holders. The truck feels pretty good at like quarter throttle or half throttle. Like it's going up this hill like fine. Like no lack of power. I wouldn't even consider it slow. But if you like give it more than like half throttle, like I don't know, it falls on its face. You don't even hear any exhaust. You just hear like the intake sucking noise. Sure does suck. So I don't know. I guess I might actually need some tuning. I don't know if it's. I mean, hell, it could have a bad mass airflow sensor. I don't know if the headers are whacking out the tune that bad. I can't see it. The rear O2s and stuff are deleted. It is throwing a check engine light, but when I checked on that, it was just the evap stuff. Overall, the trans seems to work good though. Just went through all the gears and in the lockup. It's just like as found in the junkyard. I put a filter and gasket in it because the pan had that hole in it. But that's it. It's the same converter that was in it in the junkyard. It's not rebuilt or anything. So the 4L80 luck has continued so far, at least for me. Here, I'll give it the beans here so you can see how unimpressive it is. First gear all the way to 50. So, I mean, I don't think it's really that the engine is lacking power as much as these gears just suck. Plus, I'm on like 28 something inch tires over 235, 75, 15s are. That's not helping anything. Also, you might have heard, it pings its balls off when you're on the gas. You need to figure that out too. You can really hear it through the headers and like no sound insulation. And if you're curious to why the view might keep changing on the camera, it's that every time I make a left-hand corner or hit the brakes, the camera falls over. I have to quick make a right-hand corner hard to knock it back on the tripod again. A little bit of movie magic for you, or tearing down the fourth wall. So there we have it. Something actually got finished, more or less. There's going to be a lot more with this yet, because this is going to be my new daily driver once I get everything like completely ironed out, most importantly the air conditioning. I'm also going to lower it Just kind of recoup some money to order the lowering setup for it. Different tires, same wheels. Gotta take the stupid stake body thing off the back because it's annoying. I think it looks cool, like all farm truckish and everything, but rattles like hell. Like you think the bed's falling off the truck, it's so loud. But overall, it turned out pretty good. I'm happy this truck's like finally usable compared to with the turbo engine in it. I mean, I know everyone's like disappointed that the shitty eBay turbo setup engine didn't stay in it for your own amusement. But at least now this truck will be a cool daily driver, and it actually drives pretty nice. So, like I said, there'll be more about this in the future, but the actual like LS swap project, I guess, is done. See you soon.